So glad to see you all here. Good morning. And I want to start off our session on the business case for hiring persons with disabilities by thanking our sponsor, Express Employment. And we have Emily Bogue, who's the business development specialist who really works hard to connect employers to talent in our market. Emily, will you say a word of welcome?
Yeah, hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. I was just happy to be able to walk outside and my fingers not freeze off this morning.
That's good.
Yeah, we're excited to be here in partnership with the Chamber. We're passionate about all things talent and people. So we've been very excited to sponsor this series. And we've been in Columbus since 2014 and in the South Indy market for the last 16 years. So we've kind of expanded down this way. We're excited to be here. We help hire entry-level industrial talent as well as skilled professional talent. So if we can't fill all the jobs, but we love to help some great companies here in Columbus do that. So we appreciate everyone's attendance today.
Thank you, Emily. Really appreciate your support. Right now in Columbus, unemployment is hovering around 3%. And our study of those who are seeking employment show us that we have fewer people in the workforce than we did a year and a half ago. So this is a really important topic, and it's a good time to think about all the populations who could be a part of the solution. And what we know and what we'll hear today is that businesses that hire persons with disabilities and businesses that foster inclusive cultures report bottom line benefits and a proven return on investment. And so I'm anxious for you all to hear from Grace Kessler, Executive Director of the ARC of Bartholomew County, to kick us off. And then after Grace, we'll hear from Mary Hamlin, Bcsc's Transition Coordinator. So Grace, I think you've got some slides to share and we'll let you get started.
Thank you all. And we're going to shake it up a little. And actually, I'm going to let Mary introduce herself first and we will go from there.
Grace. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much.
And let me just insert, we seem to have turned off the chat feature. So I apologize, but with a group this size, we'll be able to make our comments and get our questions answered. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, we should probably reiterate, this is, a more high level conversation that Mary will mention. We could talk for hours and have conversation about this topic. But if there's a question you have in between, don't hesitate to raise your hand or ask. We're happy to break that up. So.
Absolutely. Yes, we are. We want to keep this a very fluid, open conversation as we go through our slides. So as Grace said, please feel free to ask questions as we go through. And we will have time at the end also for questions. So again, my name is Mary Hamlin. I am the Bcsc Transition Coordinator. That is my position is where I are helping our students with disabilities as they are exiting into our community as adults and making sure that they become as inclusive into our community as all are able. So, and then we also have Grace. And Grace, I will let you.
Yeah, Mary, are you on slides?
Yep.
Yeah, there we go. Not that you don't know what we look like. Thankfully, we've had the opportunity, I think, to meet most of you on the call. I was flipping through. I think I either know many of you personally or know your name. And so thank you again for joining us today. We're excited to join in this conversation because, as Cindy mentioned, it's very relevant. And I think it's also complementary to some of the other conversations that have happened around talent talks. For example, last week, there was a talent talk about hiring individuals who are coming into recovery and out of substance abuse maybe, and those difficulties that may occur there. I believe there is a talk, I think it's this week, around hiring veterans. And so There's a lot of overlap with disability in both of those communities. Veterans, whether that be acquired disability during service, or individuals who have mental health struggles post substance abuse or while they're in recovery. And so we are happy to call in, but again, I'm Grace, and currently I am the executive director of the ARC of Bartholomew County. I joined them literally the week after the pandemic started. So I don't really sometimes know what my job is completely supposed to look like, but we've adjusted, and we are here in the community to serve individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we act truly as a resource center. We do many social events normally, unfortunately not as many this year, but it acts as a networking center for families and individuals with disabilities themselves to help them find jobs, help them find direct support persons, whatever it may be. We're hopefully there to redirect and provide resources. So a little bit about me as well and why this is relevant to me. I grew up here in Columbus as well as Mary, and I myself have a physical disability and have had the opportunity to go through the school system here, as well as be employed at Cummins Inc., of course, our large employer here. I left Columbus for a little bit to pursue further education, but then I've come back and worked primarily in nonprofit and then some accessibility consulting on the side. And so while this is a very relevant topic, and important to everyone, it's especially important to me because I've seen firsthand how being employed truly affects your life for the positive. And so we're excited to share some more. All right. You can go then. Okay. So a little bit of data I think is important as we move forward with this, and just understanding, I think, what is disability and how common is it? And so it changes a little bit, but about 1 in 4 people have a disability. And so that can be everything from a maybe more severe physical or developmental disability to even diabetes, for example, is technically a diagnosed disability. When we're thinking about the workforce, you might actually already have many employees who have disabilities, but they do not self-disclose, as that is their choice. And maybe they don't need to disclose to have the job that they have, or they don't need any accommodations. And so the number's pretty large. As I mentioned before, when we think about adding veterans in and crossing over with that, or other minority groups and disabilities, that number grows. And it grows even more when you think about family members, friends who are connected to people with disabilities. So when we're thinking about that population of people, whether you're marketing to them as customers or engaging them, it's a pretty big number. So you can go to the next slide, Mary. Again, just wanted to provide a couple broader understandings of a couple more common disabilities. So I guess this is more than a couple, but common things that we might see. And when we think about hiring someone with a disability, I think most people are assuming it might be someone with a physical disability or someone who uses a wheelchair or a mobility aid. But in reality, the people who actually use wheelchairs, it's a pretty low number compared to the larger amount of individuals with disabilities. And so we see other disabilities affected or coming into play maybe with regards more to age. As employees might age, they might also acquire disabilities, whether that might be vision concerns or hearing concerns. That's always something to keep in mind as well, that even though your employee might not have a disability currently, they could acquire one anyway. And I think keeping in mind that the disabled minority population is really one of the few, really one of the only minority groups that you can join at any point in time, whether it be a tragic accident or short-term disability. And so many different types of disabilities that we're going to talk about. And so when we think about hiring, try to broaden your perspective, because for the sake of this, we are going to talk about maybe someone who is high functioning developmentally, but maybe has a physical disability, or vice versa, someone who has minimal physical disabilities, but might have more developmental disabilities. And so we will move along. Again, I like data. I think this graph shows a good example of what Cindy mentioned. There is a large untapped market of individuals with disabilities in our community and really globally. And there are a lot of things that come into play when we think about why people aren't working with disabilities. Some of that is, how do I say this, culturally, maybe it's politically. There's a lot of number games when someone with a disability might have high medical needs and they're receiving social support. Going to work and losing that social support is a pretty tough decision they might have to make. And so even if every employer was amazing at hiring, there are some other barriers as well. But at least moving towards eliminating those barriers and understanding that there's a pretty big gap of individuals who want to work. I think that's the other thing to keep in mind. Many people with disabilities want to work. And as we know in our day-to-day lives, your job is so much of who you are, how you interact with others, how you build your community, how you make friends. And so providing that opportunity to individuals is pretty crucial in creating a inclusive and welcoming community. All right, now you can go on. All right. No, you're fine. All right, just watching my time. So I talked a little bit about some of the more reasons why people might not be hired. So I wanted to reflect on a little bit of those unconscious biases that I think that we talk about a lot and I think are also relevant in this conversation. Some of the more common reasons why people with disabilities aren't hired, I won't read these word for word, but wanted you to have them. I think people or employers just might not understand disability in general. And so there's a misconception that someone with a severe physical disability also might have severe developmental disabilities. And that's just not true. In some instances, of course, but really just a better understanding of disability awareness is crucial, I think, for employers. People I talk to on a daily basis, there are many people who just have never personally interacted with someone with a physical disability. And so their perception is they received it from TV and the media, or maybe they know of one situation that was really, strange or something. And so they don't have a real life example because we're working on it, but people with disabilities aren't always accurately represented in the media or in these places. And so I'm happy to be here to talk to you about this from a more personal side as well. But a couple other things are just the misconceptions about maybe the cost of hiring someone with a disability. That's something Mary and I have heard over and over. Well, if I hire someone who has a developmental disability, it's going to cost me so much, to monitor what they're doing, to train them. Or if I hire someone with a vision disability, that's a lot of technology I'm going to need to put on my computers, and that's just too much. I don't think we can afford that. And so this comes up a lot, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get on further, but keep that in your mind. If there's ever been someone you know of, or that thought process of, oh, that might be more effort than it's worth. It's a pretty common theme. And the last one that I'll briefly mention is just, there's a conception that, oh, these individuals might have high healthcare needs. And that is just not always true. And so it is not necessarily going to raise your insurance premiums or any of these statistically. And I'll mention why that is. But so these are a couple, and there are many more, but all right, Mary, you can, any chime-ins, Mary?
No, I think it is a misconception of what to do and being concerned about how to approach hiring someone with a disability, because there just is a lack of experience. And I think it's important that you and I are available to talk to people one-on-one if you're interested in how to go about this. And we can talk more about that as well, but and we're gonna give you those resources.
Definitely. And I think it's also good to remember that all of your employees have wants and needs and potentially accommodations, whether that's just work-life balance, or maybe they are a caregiver for someone else as well. That's something to keep in mind. So it's not that you're just making accommodations or exceptions, if that's what you want to call it, for people with disabilities. You're just, extending a more flexible workforce or work policies in a way. And so in this conversation, we are going to talk again. The title of the talk is The Business Case for Disabilities. So I'm going to now give you a couple of the data points and reasonings as to why it's so good to hire individuals with disabilities and the benefits. And the first one of those is really truly innovation. When you hire individuals from diverse backgrounds, including individuals with disabilities, you are tapping into more people with broader sets of ideas. People with disabilities have to constantly adapt to their world every single day. Just last week, I got stuck in the snow and had to call a friend and figure out how I was not going to freeze, and just odd things where I was required to think quickly, think about who might be in call distance. And we all do this, sometimes as well. You get a flat tire, whatever it may be. We all are. Yeah, exactly. You phone a friend. But I think our individuals with disabilities are just, their creativity and thinking about how they have to manage a world that is unfortunately not completely built for them really broadens their thinking, I think, and bringing that into your workforce helps with innovation. And so whether that's you're implementing new management strategies and thinking about how you can attract people, whether that trickles down and should into your product and service innovation. So if you're a company who is maybe you're a tech company or a clothing company, and if you start thinking outside the box on how my products can be used for a wider audience, you're all of a sudden marketing to that large group of individuals with disabilities. So your marketing increases because you have someone on your staff as an employee who can share those firsthand experiences of what it's like to use a cell phone with a really great adaptive technology. And so having that in-house really helps you think about things as they come along and, be more innovative in that way. So it's ultimately, I think, better for your company. And I think you don't always have to think big, like a big company either. Smaller businesses can work too. If you're employing individuals with disabilities, that person, an employee, can help you. Maybe it's just moving things around the store so it's more accessible, or maybe it's providing closed captioning on your weekly videos about your little boutique or something, whatever it may be. It helps.
And Grace, I'd like to, if I can insert myself here, but I have worked with a lot of our smaller businesses when they're working with interns with our students, and I've sat down with them and given different ways to kind of support our students with disabilities in starting a job and managing the job. And 9 times out of 10, the hiring manager I'm working for goes, wow, this would be really helpful for all of my employees. And so often when you are thinking outside the box and giving those supports for one individual, you can see that the scope reaches a larger group of your employee and your staff.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mary. I always think about the ADA and how there's such pushback sometimes to make something accessible or to put in a ramp or whatever it may be. But in reality, if there's a ramp somewhere, everyone can use it, whether you're walking or rolling. If there are features that are easy to reach in the bathroom or sinks, everyone can use those. And so I also want to apologize if you hear a saw. I'm having construction done in my house, and this was the best place to record this video. Anyways, good old COVID. All right, we will move on. So I've touched on this a little bit, but I think another key factor that has been researched is improved productivity. So oftentimes the assumption, as I mentioned, was that, these individuals might not be as productive. But things such as employee retention and less absenteeism is proven across the board on employer surveys regarding people with disabilities. They show up on time, they stay as long as they need to, they have fewer or the same amount of sick days. There is no data correlating that these individuals are overwhelmingly going to be less productive than your other employees. So I think that's important to understand, because also, giving individuals a chance and seeing them for their ability makes someone's self-worth feel, really good. And so I think, they're going to take advantage of that and be a good employee for you. And if there are issues and justified issues, you address those just the same as you would any other employee. And I think and Mary can talk maybe some on that in a bit, but there's a stress or a fear that you could never fire someone with a disability. And, that goes into other areas as well. But I think it's important to remember that if you're purely focusing on that employee being able to, perform in the ways that you've adapted them or adapted the job for, then you should be good. So one other thought I just wanted to mention was your other employees will actually have increased productivity. So one interesting thing is that when you really focus on how you can be an adaptive and an inclusive environment for people with disabilities, this trickles down to all your employees. Your other employees will feel comfortable maybe expressing concerns that they have. And if you're willing to adapt to those, you create a better work environment overall. And so it's not just, for one group of individuals or another. And again, we've seen data that shows working in a diverse and inclusive culture makes you value your employer, again, makes you want to work there longer, and makes you form better relationships and improve communication.
And more people want to use your company as a resource. And so that is,
Absolutely. I think, and Mary, if you go to the next slide, this return on investment, I think hiring people with disabilities and varying abilities is obviously the right thing to do, but we're also showing you that, you know, there is a business case for it, and it's not just a charity project. You should be doing this because these people have valuable skills that they can bring to the workforce, and they're not being tapped into. And so, you know, return on investment is absolutely there when you hire individuals. So as I mentioned earlier, there actually are average of the data out there around manufacturing in these types of places. The average insurance costs are actually, they stay the same or potentially sometimes lower, because we just aren't seeing these increased safety issues. If people are trained appropriately and the job is adapted to suit them, then they work just as productively as other employees. The other big thing is improved market share. So again, back to that, if you hire people with disabilities, other people with disabilities in their family are more apt to buy your product, use your, you know, come to your store, promote your product, because you are truly ensuring that their voice as a customer is reflected in the product. That makes sense. So they want, just like every you know, shopper, if you see your image in the marketing, if you see the product really reflecting your needs, you're absolutely going to use that product, shop at that store, because you feel that they are speaking to you. And they are, because they're going that extra effort to make sure that the products or that their store is good for everyone, and that they've got employees who are ensuring that that it's making it better for everyone. So, and you're ultimately making an investment in your community. You know, good business practices creates a better community, and when you have a better community, people want to come work for you and work for your job. People might relocate if they understand that it's a pretty great community as well. Cindy talked on Friday and showed that awesome video of Columbus, and kind of made me sad because it was a very social video and a very fun video, and I miss those times. But it also showed that, you know, Columbus is a great place, and I think great businesses have absolutely contributed to that. And so how do we continue that and continue to tap into that broader market?
And I think, you know, when we look at the return on investment, we've given you kind of case by case and data, but then I think it's important that we look at some case studies that, you know, some of these big companies absolutely have realized the potential for growth and improvement in their companies by making cases to hire people with disabilities. And Microsoft and Walgreens are two companies that we all know, and they have made this an initiative to the point that I will let you do your own you know, research on it. But I have a quote here that the Microsoft, they claim that without diversity, they would not be able to keep fueling the engines of innovation as a cutting edge company that is a core necessity for them. They don't see inclusion as something they do or a chore of accommodation, but rather as a way to build cultural competence for their company. And so they have really tapped in to see that considering the diversity and people with multiple different needs allows them to see their company and grow their company to be able to meet the needs of people worldwide. Another is Walgreens with Randy Lewis. He oversaw their distribution centers in the 90s. And he absolutely believed that people with disabilities could do more. And so he really pioneered an employment model that incorporated people with disabilities and found the different supports that could help his company grow and learn and be a place where people could have meaning and increase their value. And with that, he found, you know, less turnover. When someone really likes where they work, when they feel valued, people stick with you. And that is the case with those with disabilities. You will have a lot less turnover. And the time that Randy Lewis was working for Walgreens, and with this initiative, he saw the chain grow from 1,500 Walgreens to over 8,000. And he absolutely contributes this success to the involvement of people with disabilities in his practice. And with that case, here in our own hometown, Cummins is absolutely doing the same thing. They have made an initiative to hire people with disabilities and people with from veterans, and really learning how to incorporate hiring processes and supports in place to increase their diversity. In fact, I believe we have a few of the Cummins people I've worked with, have the absolute pleasure. We have been working with our students with Bcsc using the Cummins School to Work model, where they, any student can apply for these school to work positions, but we made an effort to collaborate and hire students with disabilities into the school work model. And we did this by having, this is kind of the lingo, but we had pre-eds counselors that were supporting our students in these positions. Myself as the transition coordinator or the pre-eds counselors, they also helped and we would work with the hiring managers and the students to look at accommodations. How are things going? What could this is what the student needs. This is how we can interact and expect from a student with a disability. These are our students that were working towards diplomas. And so we had a nice kind of working model. And I just want to tell you that what I've seen with being in the weeds with this is, one, watching our students really have a sense of self that grew tenfold, and really felt that they had a future in our community. And many went on to go to college. And I feel believing that they had these positions working within Cummins allowed them to really see their full potential, and to see Cummins saying, wow, this young man, he really thinks differently. This young man happens to be, happens to have autism, and he really was able to help their company in the apps department think differently about some things, the way the apps department worked. Same thing with the drafting. We had really good success with drafting and cybersecurity in the IT department. Of course, with COVID times coming, that there is no school to work at all right now with Cummins, so this isn't going on at the moment. But when it opens up again, we are ready to hit the ground running. We didn't change much either with the model. We used Cummins School to Work. We did it just as all same requirements that other students had. And then we just gave support to the student and to the managers as needed. And their goal is independence, and that they don't need us, and then we step out. So that was a very successful model. Cummins is also doing this worldwide, globally. They are taking this model and using it elsewhere, as well as hiring adults with disabilities into their company. And so they too have seen the hiring a diverse population, it helps your company grow and be innovative. So we have now taken that with our own school, Bcsc School to Work model, kind of used that with, as Cummins has, and using Bcsc has lots of different jobs. This is kind of tailored more for our students that might not be earning a diploma, but there are many, many jobs within Bcsc that we can use as an opportunity to what jobs are out there. We might, 9th and 10th graders, go out and do some job observations and understand what jobs are out there with our younger students. Then when they get older and their academic schedule allows the time, and then they can do some non-paid internships with the Bcsc job coach, which is either the teacher or the TA, helping them until they can become independent with the job. Brett Bozeman has been excellent working and helping us gain these opportunities to grow. And his hiring managers have been fabulous. And so that within our own school corporation, we are developing a work model. And then we are looking, and again, COVID kind of put a damper on this. Our next step would be that our students become independent within these jobs at Bcsc. And they would actually do like very similar to the Cummins model. Our students would then be paid per semester to do a job. And with that, and we are not making jobs for them. These are jobs that BCS has that are open. We need to fill. And so our students would work and just for a semester. And so at this point in time, the hiring manager has myself or the teacher of record or the TAs as support. By this time, the students should be independent enough that we shouldn't be there as needed, but we can do what's called kind of follow along. And if it works, then after the semester is over, the student can continue with that position if it works for the student and if it works for the hiring manager. And if it doesn't work, the job was just a semester long. And so maybe the student needs some other skills we need to work on. We need to back up a little bit and give those skills, and we're not ready for pay. And the end goal, of course, is as we have an exiting senior, the conversation could be, we know your work ethic, we know how you do, you work well with this, you have this hiring kind of background. And BCSC could then hire our students as they're exiting. And then if, however, it's determined either between the hiring manager or the position's unavailable or the student is not interested, but the student then does have work experience for their resume. They have the hiring manager that can be a referral, a job reference. And so again, COVID has put a little crimp into what we were doing, but Brett and I are ready to go. We're getting ready to start again these non-paid internships as we are back in school and continuing on, and that his hiring managers have the support from our staff or myself with the students, and the students have support. And again, our job is to not be needed in a job. My job is to move on. There are more students coming. And so the independence is the goal.
Mary, there's one other, if actually you can flip back if you want.
Okay.
One thing that I remembered about Cummins as well is that Cummins has, like many other larger companies and maybe some small as well, they've created employee resource groups, whether that is around race or ethnicity or general interests, but they also have one for individuals with disabilities or family members, as I mentioned. And so creating that resource group has allowed individuals who work there to have a space to talk about, how can we continue to improve our culture and our community, and have a space as well as really a resource group. Well, that's literally what I just called it for other employees though. So if other employees have questions or concerns or whatever it may be, maybe they are really nervous about self-disclosing their own disability, they can reach out to that employee resource group and feel like it's a safe space. I know larger companies sometimes struggle with figuring out how to get people to self-disclose. Well, it's a personal choice. Some disabilities, as we talked about, are obviously much more visible, and so you can notice that, but many are invisible and you might not notice them. And so I think your job as an employer is to support that employee the best that you can, and those employees will make those decisions on themselves. So,
and I want to point out also
but
that
and the beast,
go ahead.
Sorry, you go. Sorry, no, there was a delay.
That I want to point out that we are also, BCSC has also been working with a lot of other small businesses within the area for these work opportunities for our students. And they have really appreciated, the support and learning. And so, yeah, I just think it really does help. And I think we're showing kind of the bigger picture of these bigger companies that are making this work. But I also want to make it clear that a lot of our smaller locally owned businesses have begun to work with us as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, Mary, we were just talking about the other day about some of our smaller businesses are worried about maybe the liability of hiring someone with a disability. Do you want to talk about that a little?
Sure, and that's been often is a case when I approach a small business is the liability. And as long as we've had the right training for our students, or they could easily go ahead, instead of being a non-paid internship, they can work for minimum wage, and then they're covered under the hiring insurance pieces. So, and the liability, actually, the data shows that there is less liability, there are less accidents that happen with our students or with our people with disabilities, because they're a lot more careful. They get the training, they want to be there, so they want to make sure they do their job well.
Yep, and I think that's the key. It's whether you need someone for an internship or a longer time. I think it's also okay to create, many companies maybe have those 3-month trial periods or 6 months, but they're still paid, because we are all valuable individuals and we deserve to be paid for our work. And I think that's the biggest argument, is that understanding, no matter how or what you bring to the table, you deserve to be compensated for that, to show you that you bring that to the table. So lots of good stuff happening in our community, and we're definitely excited. Some stuff has slowed down a little bit, but I think it's important to remember that again, we being Mary and Bcsc are working very hard to make sure that our students are trained and qualified and supported along that route while they're at Bcsc. And then, we are trying as well to bridge that gap into local colleges, if that's the direction that they choose. So, if you're looking for other places and examples or individuals to hire, reach out to Ivy Tech or IUPUC. They have a disability office as well, and could connect or be happy to work with you as a business as far as job placement goes. So, all right, so a couple last bits we wanted to discuss before Q&A was just a few takeaways that I think are important to remember. And I briefly mentioned reasonable accommodation. And so actually about 60% of people who are hired don't need any accommodation at all. And the majority of those who do need accommodation, it's less than $500. And so I think, as I mentioned, the assumption is that, oh my gosh, it's going to be thousands of dollars to build this or that. And if you have an inaccessible location, that might be an issue, another topic. But if you are just providing day-to-day resources and accommodations for someone to use to do their job, it's pretty low budget. ADA has helped out a lot, especially because buildings, are required for the most part to be a certain level of accessible. And so, for instance, myself, if the building has a ramp and a few other things, then I don't need very many accommodations. But I think having that open conversation, again, individuals with disabilities, if they do need a lot of accommodations, well, there are two things that could happen. One, it's a situation, as Mary talked about, where that individual already has a direct support person who's helping them through the job process, or the individual knows exactly what they need and can help and guide you along in that process. Again, there are resources and there's government funding, there's many things to tap into. And so hopefully that shouldn't be a true barrier. Also wanted to mention something around interviewing individuals. So we say use the same interview techniques as you would use for anyone else that you're speaking with. Ask them about what they do well, ask them about areas of potential improvement or areas they may struggle with. You're obviously not allowed to ask them blatantly what their disability is or these types of things, but most individuals will be able to explain to you and maybe, be honest if they choose. I struggle doing XYZ, but I can accommodate that. Or maybe they bring their own personal support person with them to work to help them run the copy machine, or whatever those extra tasks are that they're required. Many individuals might have a support person who accompanies them to work, and that can help them with those more difficult tasks. But focus on what people can do, and potentially if things in the job need to change a little bit, or if you can be flexible and maybe not completely change the job description or anything like that, but maybe specific items can be rearranged, consider that. If it's not going to be a big hassle or a large disadvantage to your company, I think it's important to consider. And if anything has told us that we must be flexible, it's COVID, because you will get left behind as a company if you don't constantly consider. We had never had a clue that we would have to consider how to be adaptive during a pandemic. And so this has forced us to really think about what are those accommodations, whether I need to work 3/4 time so that I can care for my child, or that I can have, some additional time to go to the doctor, and, the job description's adjusted that way. Or better yet, I think COVID's opened the door a lot for people with disabilities, in the sense that people now have the opportunity to work remotely and work at home. That is a barrier. Transportation is a huge barrier to people maybe with larger physical disabilities. And so if they know, oh, I only have to find transportation maybe once a week, or that I can still be a part of a team and do that virtually, and the skills that are needed can be done virtually, I think it's a perfect opportunity to really open that door and think about the vast amount of people who could take advantage of this virtual world. We'll talk on the next slide a little bit about agencies, but then, oops, sorry, I have one more. If you go back one, Mary. Oh, thank you. I think I might be on a small delay. There you go. Perfect. Yes. So the last thing, it seems simple, but respect, retain, and promote individuals and employees with disabilities just like you would every other person. So once you've hired that individual, you have to maintain your end of the bargain, and ensuring that you as an employer are respecting their rights and their wishes. I think it's important that you provide that employee training opportunities, and on the other side of it, that you provide the other employees training opportunities, specifically related to maybe disability training and disability awareness training, so that those other employees can better understand that individual's experience. And maybe that individual is willing to talk to the employees and give that training themselves, and help share their method to get things done. It might look a little different, but they can share that they're just as productive as another individual. And sort of breaking down those perception barriers. Unfortunately, we can try, but as we all know, our unconscious bias can still get in the way. And so bringing the conversation to the table, I think, can be scary, but talking about it can also be a relief as well, because it can eliminate some of those misconceptions, and it can make people feel more comfortable to come to the table. And then, of course, promoting and empowering. Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say promoting and empowering individuals. Sorry.
that you and I think if you're looking at wanting to know more, that you and I, or you're looking at developing your employers and hiring managers, that is something that Grace and I would feel comfortable helping to come in and talk to companies and your people about, and kind of work on the fear and stigma and the what ifs in a very, Grace and I work a lot together And sometimes I might say or do something and she just is very good about going, Mary, actually, and I'm an advocate, and so it's a very open, honest conversation with one another, but intention is everything. And we can help others with what is the best way to handle situations that are very sticky. And so that is, and so
Absolutely here to help.
you're here to
And I think it's, yeah, and I think it's the biggest, we want to stress it's not, companies shouldn't necessarily do this out of obligation, but the best companies who do this well recognize the advantage of hiring the individuals of diverse populations, and they recognize that there's ROI behind it, that there's better community within the business. And once you recognize those advantages, it becomes, it just becomes a better place to work, and it becomes a little easier. So I'll let Mary mention a few of these employment specialists, and I will mention as well, the ARC is working on a smaller training for a digital training for businesses, and just touches on disability understanding and awareness, as well as some best practices for being a good business in general for customers, and then as well on how you can start to work on hiring more individuals.
And I think the next piece is, okay, let's say you're interested in doing this. Where do you go? How does it happen? Of course, if you're interested in starting with some student internships, that would be me. If you want to work with some students and kind of getting your feet wet a little, we would absolutely love to work with any company within our community. Our goal with Bcsc is that our whole community becomes our work training opportunity, that we, because the better prepared our students are for the real world, the better our community is. And then if you're looking at adults and working with adults, there are employment agency specialists in our community. The services are not paid by you. The student or the client has vocational rehabilitation services that give this job shadowing opportunities, job coaching, and also follow along services that is not paid for by your company. Two companies just in general are DSI and Stonebelt, that there are many different employment agencies. And again, that's something that Grace with the ARC, if you're working with adults, Grace is your contact person to learn about places you might be able to go for support. And if you are looking at, trying to implement internships into your company, then that would be with high school kids, that would be with me, our opportunities. So do
I
we
think
want to
that's all we have for you. Again, we know we could talk more, but if anyone had any specific questions about what we talked about, or an example, or whatever it may be, I guess, Cindy, we have a few minutes unless there's something else.
Absolutely. I thank you for this wonderful information. You certainly got me thinking. We really have learned how to better provide accommodations for all our employees because of COVID, and that's a real positive, whether it's working from home because parent is responsible for e-learning, or maybe changing someone's interaction with customers because they have an underlying health condition and need to have more of a behind the scenes role. I mean, there are many examples of people who've had to sort of accommodate their workers just in this last year. And I think it's proven we can do that.
Absolutely. I hope that this mentality and this mindset, really stays with us as we move forward and we think about, sometimes accommodating a little and giving a little as a company actually gets you a lot, because you get a happier employee, you get, better morale, and ultimately, I think you'll move forward as a business.
Cindy,
I think you gave us.
This is Mary
Go ahead.
with the city. And first, thank you, Grace and Mary. That was really great. A lot of, to Cindy's point, a lot of really useful information. And I just really want to give a big plug to Grace. As you know, she's a city council member. I've known Grace for many, many years, and she's one of my favorite people. But a couple years ago, the city was looking at City Hall, trying to redo our restrooms for accessibility, and it just really wasn't going to work. There were 35. It's a 35-year-old building, and so we thought through what we could do, and really was outside of the box. And so we went to the first floor, and we took out an area. Renovated it with Grace's help. We turned it into a really nice, large family restroom. And the more, to a point that both Grace and Mary made, the more we started thinking about it, you know, as City Hall, obviously, the pandemic aside, we have many people who come in and use our facilities. And this allows people with children to very easily take their children into a restroom. It allows older adults who sometimes have to go in with their spouse, as well as accessibility. And so I just really appreciate her willingness to work with us. And she did. If we got it wrong, she told us, and we changed it. And I don't know that it's perfect, but we've seen a lot of people use it. And it's just a great example of thinking outside the box, looking for some unused space or a way of accommodating people that really just provides an accommodation for a lot of people. So thank you publicly to Grace for your help, but I would really recommend talking with her if you have other issues that she could help you, or others could help you just talk through. That's really helpful. Thank you. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary. So I think that's the summary of it all. What's good for individuals with disabilities and making those accommodations is truly good for everyone in your business. And figuring out where you can start small is the best way. Don't overwhelm yourself, but you know, starting small. And please reach out if there's concerns or questions.
Any final questions? Well, I'll tell you what, we are going to post this recorded session on our YouTube channel. So if you want to revisit the session or forward it to someone in your HR department, it should be there by the end of the day. We're really delighted to have been a part of this. We thank you, Grace and Mary. Give us the best way to contact you, or we can't put it in the chat, but can you shout out your
probably Facebook or the arcbc.org. You can find me there. grace.kessler@thearcbc.org.
How about you, Mary?
Same thing, Facebook through Messenger is easy, Mary Hamlin, or at my work email at hamlin.bcsc.k12.in.us, or Facebook Messenger.
A lot of ways
Worlds collide. It's
lots of ways to reach you. Well, thanks again to both of you for this outstanding information. Very helpful, very on point. And thanks to Express Employment for their support of our programming. I will let you know, you've already mentioned that we're doing the session with INVETS and the Department of Workforce Development around hiring veterans. There's some support available to employers, and that's tomorrow at 9 a.m. on Zoom. And then Wednesday, we have Sam Julka, who is a designer, but she's done extensive research on what the hybrid workplace looks like in a post-COVID world. So that could be of great interest to discover, how do we take what worked about working from home and enhance it, and maybe get rid of some things that didn't work so well. And then finally on Thursday, again at 9 a.m., we have the Indiana InternNet program with us, giving us the best practices around internships, which you also touched on today. So a couple good sessions coming up this week. Hope you can join us for one of those. I'll let you go. Have a great day and have a great
Thank you
week.
all. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, ladies.